Traveling through history, the show that uncovers the past mysteries. Washington, Jefferson, Alexander the Great, William the Conqueror, or the independence of the states.
Well, welcome to another episode of Traveling Through History. Tonight we're going to talk about a very consequential figure in world history and in Christianity, and that is Constantine the Great. He was an emperor about 300 years after Jesus was crucified by the Romans. So how profound was it that he came along as a Roman emperor? His father was one of the 4 emperors at the time, and he ended up, during his life, bringing the entire Roman Empire back under his control, all 4 parts of it. And having 2 capitals at the end of his life, one in Rome, as it always was, and then one in Constantinople, a city of Byzantine that he took over and created a much larger and more impressive version of. And during his life, he picked up Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. And again, as I said before, what an incredible feat that was for him and for the empire and for Christianity as a religion, because it went from a banned religion, a religion that was persecuted through those 300 years after Jesus' death, to now being the official religion of the Roman Empire. And so it was an incredible thing. I will say he did believe very strongly in religious freedom, and so he was okay with other religions practicing as well in the Roman Empire. But he had a mother who was a devout Christian, who believed in the Christian faith and in the Bible. She preached to him her whole life as he was growing up, and he didn't really accept it until he was actually in battle one day. And we'll talk some details about that, but it was a victorious battle for him and his troops as he was unifying the Roman Empire under his control. And in that battle, he saw a vision of the cross, and he saw a vision of what he thought at the time was Christ and God. And from that day on, he started to espouse Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. So what an incredible turnaround and marking point for history and for the Christian faith, for this Roman Empire to adopt it and make it essentially the main religion for the empire and for everything that was in the known world at the time. So we're going to get into tonight into Constantine the Great, about him, about his life, his early life, his political career, his military career, and how he unified the empire under himself, how he built Constantinople into the largest, most powerful city in the world, even bigger than Rome, and then also his conversion to Christianity and the importance of that. And then finally, we're going to also talk about the Council of Nicaea, which was something that he converged and had all of the religious leaders of the known world come into the same location, Nicaea, to meet and to discuss how to standardize practices and beliefs across the Christian religion. A really important unification of many of the different sects of Christianity into one overall thought about how Christianity should be metered out, about how Christianity should live in terms of its laws and its customs. So we'll talk also about that very important Council of Nicaea and what came out of it. So let's go ahead and talk about Constantine the Great, the first Christian emperor of the Roman Empire, and also the Council of Nicaea. All right, so this is Constantine the Great and the Council of Nicaea. He took over the empire and started consolidating power in 306, and he ended up dying and giving over power to his sons in 337 AD. So he had about a 31-year reign as emperor and as unifier of the Roman Empire. You see some great pictures there of him to the top left as a soldier, just below that as a Christian emperor. And there's just great statues all over Europe and mainly around Rome and Italy as well, but over in Turkey and other regions of Constantine. He was a huge impact on many different societies. There's also a picture there in the bottom center of what he looked like as a young man before he actually took over as emperor, and he was serving for his father, who was one of the 4 emperors at the time. And then to the bottom right of that is what the Council of Nicaea looked like, with Constantine sitting in the middle, presiding over the activity and the event itself, and then all the different religious leaders from around the world. So the Roman Empire, we need to look at it from 300 to 400 AD and just kind of give some context on what was happening during this time. The Roman Empire from 300 to 400 was a period of dramatic transformation marked by its division into two parts: the rise of Christianity and increasing instability in the West, culminating in its eventual split and the emergence of the Eastern or Byzantine Empire. While the West faced barbarian incursions and internal strife, setting the stage for its 5th century collapse, you can imagine that the West was struggling and the East was thriving for many different reasons. Key figures like Diocletian and Constantine reshaped the empire during this century, moving the capital to Constantinople, which is in current-day Turkey, and embracing Christianity. But the vast empire could not hold together, leading to permanent division by century's end. So as you can see, when he took over in 306, Constantine, from his father, he ended up taking the 4 regions of the empire and reunifying them into one Rome under 2 different capitals, Rome and Constantinople. And he was able to hold it together during his 31-year reign, but as you can see, it ended up coming apart again later. Emperor Diocletian's system of ruling the vast empire with 4 co-emperors, or a tetrarchy is what it was called, failed after his abdication in 305 AD, leading to civil wars all over the empire. Constantine emerged victorious in those civil wars, becoming the sole ruler, unifying the empire under his control, with 2 capital cities, Rome in the west and Constantinople in the east. You can see a great map there to the bottom of what the empire looked like at the time as it was broken up in different regions, with the empire being ruled out of these 2 different major capitals. So in terms of his early life, Constantine was born around 272 AD in Naissus, or modern-day Serbia, to Flavius Constantius, a Roman officer, and Helena, a woman of humble origins from a Christian family. And she influenced his thinking about the new religion later. Constantine grew up in the Eastern Roman court under Emperor Diocletian, part of the Tetrarchy, or Rule of 4, and received military education from 10 years old until he became a full soldier. And he witnessed the Christian persecution firsthand as civil wars across the empire raged. Raised in Naissus, the city located in the province of Mosa Superior, Constantine was the son of Flavius, a Roman army officer from Mosa Superior who would become one of 4 emperors of the Tetrarchy. So you can imagine he did come from royal line, with his father rising all the way up to emperor. His mother, Helena, was a woman of low birth, probably from Bithynia, and later canonized as a saint. She is credited for the conversion of her son in some traditions, and is claimed she was the first true saint in the Roman tradition as decreed by Constantine. So you can imagine what an influence she would have been on him his entire life, talking to him about the Christian faith. And really it wasn't until he was a full-grown man where he actually adopted the religion itself. But she was a huge influence, and one of the reasons that she ended up getting sainthood many years later. In terms of Constantine's military service, his military career was defined by his rise through civil war, culminating in sole rule of the empire, and successful frontier campaigns marked by his decisive victory at the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD, and then defeating co-emperor Licinius in 324, which led to Roman military reforms, separating field armies and garrisons, strengthening the frontiers against Goths and Sarmatians, and ending with preparations for a Persian campaign before his death. That battle against Licinius in 324, of course, was the last co-emperor that he had, and that consolidated all power underneath his wings. He served with his father, Constantius I, on campaigns in Britain. He was proclaimed emperor by his troops in York in 306 after his father's death, beginning his ascent to power. Defeated his rivals Maxinius at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, a pivotal moment where he famously adopted the Christian sign Chi Rho for his forces securing the West. And it was at that very famous Battle of Milvian Bridge where he got the vision of the cross and where from that point on, he started adopting the Christian faith for his own, thinking that it was a faith of power and feeling very much like God and Christ were with him during the battle that day. After years of tension, Constantine defeated his eastern rival in 324, becoming the sole ruler of the Roman Empire, including the East. Constantine's military genius was first proven in securing his own emperorship through decisive civil war victories throughout. Some great pictures there to the right, and you can see his military service both for his father and then after his father's death, and his many victories on the battlefield. And some of these most key victories in Roman history really led him all the way to the top as the sole emperor of the empire. In terms of his family life, Constantine's family life was complex and marked by his influential mother, Helena. He also had two wives. One was Minervina and Fausta. The tragic executions of his oldest son, Crispus, and his wife, Fausta, eventually leaving the empire to his three surviving sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. His family relationship shaped his rise and his reign as emperor, with his mother Helena becoming a revered Christian figure and his sons inheriting a divided empire after his death. Minervina, his first partner, mother of his eldest son, Crispus, she was considered from the lower classes and therefore did not last in the royal court. Fausta, who was his second wife, was daughter of Emperor Maximinian, and he was his second wife, and she was mother of three sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. In the most controversial decision of his life, in 326 CE, Constantine had his son Crispus and his wife Fausta executed, an event shrouded in mystery but often linked to political intrigue and accusations of infidelity. Constantine left his vast Roman Empire to his three remaining sons when he died, who divided it amongst themselves after his death in 337 AD, and continuing the imperial line for some generations. So what a brutal decision he made there to kill his wife and one of his sons. Largely, most people who write about the period are not completely sure what happened, but they believe that it must have been a power struggle within the emperor and within the overall structure of the royal court. And he must have felt that he didn't have any political way around it other than to make this happen and then eventually leave the entire empire to his three sons. So he did have very brutal tactics at times throughout his life, even though he did have a lot of very consequential and important impacts that he brought to the world. In terms of Constantine and his career in politics, the reign of Constantine from 306 to 337 marked a fundamental rupture in the history of the Roman Empire and the Mediterranean world. As the first emperor to convert to Christianity, he transformed a persecuted religion into an institutional force at the heart of an imperial apparatus. So you can imagine this religion that had to stay in the shadows for 300 years after Jesus Christ was crucified by the Romans. And then 300 years later, Constantine makes it the state religion of the Roman Empire. What an incredible wide turn that was for the entire empire and really for the world. His religious choices, often interpreted as a blend of personal faith and political pragmatism, had a significant impact on the structure of the state, the relationship between power and religion, and Roman culture. By institutionalizing Christian privileges while navigating a gradual decline of pagan traditions, Constantine set the stage for the Roman Empire's transformation into a Christian state. So it can't be overstated how important this was for a culture that he took over that was pagan, that believed in Roman gods, and had spent many, many generations and many, many centuries doing this worship of Roman gods and of pagan symbols. And to, during a 31-year reign, turn that around completely to making it a Christian empire. Really was pretty remarkable if you think about it. Constantine's religious choices translated into political and legislative reforms that reorganized the relationships between state, religion, and society. The Edict of Milan promulgated jointly by Constantine and Licinius in 313, constituted one of the significant milestones in Constantine's religious policy. This historic text officially legalized Christianity, guaranteed freedom of worship to all religions in the empire, and ordered the restitution of property confiscated from Christians during the persecution under Diocletian. So you can see he really opened up the empire to all religions to practice, made Christianity legal, and did this restitution to Christians that had been persecuted for many years. So he really tried to set it right from a religious perspective. So Constantine, as an emperor in the West, his share of the empire consisted of Britain, Gaul, Spain, and he commanded one of the largest Roman armies in the West, which was stationed along the important Rhine frontier. He remained in Britain after his promotion to emperor, driving back the tribes of the Picts up in Scotland and securing his control of northwestern dioceses. He completed the reconstruction of military bases begun under his father's rule in Britain, and he ordered the repair of the region's major roadways. He then left for Augusta Trevernium, or Trier in Gaul, and so his Gaul campaign started, and that was the tetrarchic capital of northwestern Roman Empire. The Franks learned of Constantine's acclamation and invaded Gaul across the lower Rhine over the winter of 306-307 to try to threaten his forces. He drove them back beyond the Rhine and captured kings Esartic and Meragas. So both of those kings that came from the Franks, both were captured. The kings and their soldiers were fed to beasts at Trier Amphitheater in the Adventus, which was like a big festival. So you imagine how horrible this death must have been for these two kings and their soldiers to be fed to beasts in the amphitheater. Constantine entered Rome on October 29, 312. So you're talking 6 years after he took over as emperor, he entered Rome, and he staged a grand Adventus in the city, or a big festival, which was met with jubilation by the people. In the following years, Constantine gradually consolidated his military superiority over his rivals in the crumbling tetrarchy. In 313, he met Licinius in Milan to secure their alliance by the marriage of Licinius and Constantine's half-sister, Constantinia. During this meeting, the emperors agreed on the so-called Edict of Milan, officially granting full tolerance to Christianity and all religions in the empire. So you can see he did, both on the battlefield and also diplomatically, many different things to try to consolidate power all under himself, and he was successful. Diocletian had chosen Nicomedia in the east as his capital during the Tetrarchy, which was a city that was not too far from Byzantium and well situated to defend Thrace, Asia, and Egypt, all of which had required his military attention and might. Constantine had recognized the shift of the empire from the remote and depopulated west to the richer cities of the east, and the military strategic importance of protecting the Danube from barbarian excursions and Asia from a hostile Persia in choosing his new capital, as well as being able to monitor shipping traffic between Black Sea and Mediterranean. Among the various locations proposed for his alternative capital, Constantine appears to have toyed earlier with Sardicia, which is present-day Sofia. He was also said one time that Sardicia is my Rome. Sirmium and Thessalonica were also considered for the capital. Eventually, however, Constantine decided to work on the Greek city of Byzantium, which was already there, which offered the advantage of having already been extensively rebuilt on Roman patterns of urbanism during the preceding century by Septimius Severus and Caracalla, who had already acknowledged its strategic importance. So what he did was, in building the East, is he knew it was very important to have a counterbalancing capital to Rome out in the East, and he chose Byzantium, which was there in modern-day Turkey. It was an already established city, and what he did was essentially build on top of it and expanded it and made it much, much larger and made it defendable with actual walls, and built out many of the different things you need to be a functioning city. And eventually Constantinople, named after him, in the old Byzantium territory, became the largest city in the known world. So in terms of that capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, Constantinople, he transformed that ancient Greek city into Constantinople, dedicating it as the new capital of the Roman Empire on May 11th, 330 CE, to rival Rome and serve as the Christian center strategically located at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, building grand forums, hippodromes, palaces, and massive walls. You can see some incredible pictures there of what the artist's rendering was of what Constantinople looked like. And everyone thought that Rome was the most fantastic city that had ever been created, and it was at a time, but Constantinople made it even larger and even bigger and more grand in every way. He established it as the new Rome, populating it with art and people and laying the foundation for what became the Byzantine Empire's glorious capital, known as the Queen of all cities. He needed a new centrally located capital after reuniting the Eastern and Western empires in 324 CE, and he wanted to establish a distinctly Christian capital, moving away from Rome's pagan roots. Constantine and his engineers built wide avenues, aqueducts, cisterns, baths, and divided the city into 14 administrative regions to be governed by local control. So they essentially had what today would be like 14 different mayors that managed each of the individual capital areas in Constantinople. He constructed defensible walls, a grand palace complex, later expanded by other emperors, a massive arena for chariot races and public spectacles, able to hold huge crowds, and dedicated the city with a mass at the newly built Church of the Holy Peace, or Hagia Erin, and placed it under the protection of the Virgin Mary. Constantinople became the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire for over 1,000 years, serving as the major cultural, economic, and religious center before falling to the Ottomans in 1453. So what an incredible story of this city that Constantine established on top of an old city, expanded it out, and made it the greatest city that had ever been seen for 1,000 years. In terms of Constantine the Great and his conversion to Christianity, his conversion to Christianity began with the pivotal vision before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, which we mentioned earlier, where he saw a cross and heard "in hoc signo vinces," which means "by this sign conquer," leading him to adopt the Christian symbol, win the battle, and eventually legalize Christianity with the Edict of Milan in 313. This event transformed Christianity from a persecuted sect into a state-supported religion, with Constantine becoming the major patron of the religion, convening church councils, building churches, and promoting Christian values, though his personal journey was complex and ongoing, with full baptism occurring just a couple months before his death. Before the decisive battle against rival Maxentius, Constantine reportedly saw a luminous cross in the sky, or had a dream instructing him to use the Christian symbol Chi-Rho. You can see a picture there to the bottom right of what Chi-Rho looked like. He ordered his soldiers to mark their shields with the symbol Chi-Rho and then won the battle and attributed his success to the Christian God. From that point, he started the conversion, although he had been influenced his whole life by his mother's Christian beliefs. As we said before, Helena was a big influence on him and talked about Christianity his whole life. And after this battle, he finally converted. In terms of the Council of Nicaea, which Constantine called, and this was a call to all of the Christian religious leaders from around the known world, he convened the first council at Nicaea in 325 CE. So this is a full year after he fully reunited the entire Roman Empire under his control. He used this to unify the Roman Empire under one faith by settling theological disputes among Christian leaders from around the world. The primary dispute they had was around the Arian controversy, whether Jesus was divine or whether he was created, resulting in the first Nicene Creed, which is, of course, a very important creed in Christianity. And it affirmed Christ's divinity as of one substance with God and banning Arianism. So the whole Arian monotheism sect of Christianity was banned at this conference. And they went with the fact that Christ was indeed God's son and that he was of one substance with him. He was divine. Constantine saw religious unity as a key to political stability and used imperial power to enforce the council's decisions, though the doctrinal fight continued for decades. As the first Christian Roman emperor, Constantine believed religious division threatened imperial stability, viewing church schisms as threats to the state. He invited hundreds of bishops, mostly from the east, to Nicaea, which is modern-day Turkey, and provided generous hospitality using imperial authority to gather them all together. He personally presided over the council and issued decrees, even threatening death for hiding Arius' writings and demonstrating his commitment to the outcome of this council. Arius was an Alexandrian priest, and he argued that Jesus was created by God the Father, thus subordinate and not equal in substance or divinity. Bishops like Athanasius argued Jesus was co-eternal and of the same divine substance as the Father, and was therefore Son of God. So this is a really important schism that needed to be settled at the Council of Nicaea, and that's what they worked on during those days. In terms of the outcomes coming out of the Council of Nicaea, you see a great picture there to the right of Constantine in the middle with some of the bishops and the Nicene Creed that they agreed on. You can see that that would have been in different languages, including Greek, but very important document in Christian history, of course. The council formulated a creed or a declaration, which was a summary of the Christian faith. Several creeds were already in existence. Many creeds were acceptable to the members of the council, including Arius. From earliest times, various creeds served as a means of identification of Christians, as a means of inclusion and recognition, especially at baptism. In Rome, for example, the Apostles' Creed was popular, especially for use in Lent and for Easter. In the Council of Nicaea, one specific creed was used to define the church's faith clearly, to include those who professed it and to include those who did not. The council promulgated 20 new church laws called canons. The 20, as listed in the works of Nicene and post-Nicene fathers, were as follows. You can see 8 of them here. One of them was the prohibition of self-castration for clergy, the establishment of a minimum term of persons studying for baptism, the prohibition of a man and a woman who have both taken vows of chastity to live together, ordination of a bishop in the presence of at least 3 provincial bishops, provision for 2 provincial synods to be held annually, confirmation of ancient customs giving jurisdiction over large regions to the bishops of Alexandria, Rome, and Antioch, provision for agreement with the Noventiists, and then mercy was enjoyed towards those who had lapsed without compulsion. And those were 8 of the 20 that were agreed on. There were many, many more. There were these canons that became essentially the laws of the Christian church, along with the very important saying, which was the Nicene Creed. So these were some of the very important outcomes that came out of this meeting. In terms of Constantine and his view of Jesus Christ, he saw Jesus as the supreme unifying God of a new imperial order, using Christian doctrine to build a stronger Roman state. Even while his own spiritual journey was gradual throughout his life and intertwined with older traditions, he saw Jesus and Christianity as a means to the end of consolidating power into one central God. Over time, he came to respect Jesus much more with his study of the scriptures. He came to realize that Jesus' treatment at the hands of Rome centuries earlier was unjust, but prophesized. He used his imperial power to settle theological debates, particularly Arianism, which we just talked about, and pushed for the Nicene Creed that affirmed Jesus as God from God, light from light, true God from true God. He was baptized only by an Arian bishop close to his death in 337, and had previously favored the sun god, or Sol Invictus, suggesting a pragmatic blend of pagan and Christian beliefs for political purposes during his life. But his evolution continued until the end of his life, when he finally accepted God in his heart as the true God and Jesus as his son. So you can see his view of Jesus Christ, his overall conversion to Christianity really was a lifelong journey for him. And many people believe that that journey continued all the way from when he was a boy with his mother until he died. And during that time in between, he realized that Christianity was real and that it was something worth respecting. And it became a framework for the entire empire to be united under. In terms of Constantine the Great and his legacy, Constantine is monumental primarily for transforming the Roman Empire by first legalizing, then promoting Christianity through the Edict of Milan, and church patronage, making it the dominant religion through the agreements at the Council of Nicaea. He also established Constantinople as the new imperial capital of the Roman Empire, shifting power eastward and setting the stage for the Byzantine Empire and medieval Europe, leaving deep marks on religion, culture, and statecraft for the world even today. He poured imperial resources into building churches like Old St. Peter's, commissioned biblical texts, and funding the clergy, elevating Christianity's status to the world's dominant religion. His actions set precedents for the relationship between church and state, influencing political structures and fostering a distinct Christian civilization. He continued Diocletian's administrative reforms, dividing provinces for better governance, and reformed currency, including adding the gold standard. He left a huge architectural footprint with grand architectural projects, including new cities and churches, and he shaped the landscape and inspired future generations in Europe and Asia for centuries. So you can see what an incredibly impactful Emperor Constantine the Great was, and also just world leader and religious patron for this now most dominant religion in the world. So the impact is really immeasurable for Constantine the Great, who really came towards the end of the Roman Empire, tried to hold it together, tried to unify it, and did so for a while, but also set up, when the empire did come into pieces, set it up for additional success for several different civilizations. In terms of Constantine the Great and some of the great TVs and movies that are available, on the top row are the really great books that are available. Constantine and the Council of Nicaea, really great book there by David Henderson. Constantine the Great, Constantine the Emperor by David Potter, The Military Life of Constantine the Great, and then Constantine the Great, A Life from Beginning to End. That's a really good book because it also is a pictorial. There's some really fantastic photos and art gallery pictures that come from museums from all over the world. On the bottom are some really great movies and documentaries that were made. One called Constantine and the Cross. That was from the 1970s. Constantine the Great, Rome's Greatest Emperor. Really good film there. Then there's a movie called Constantine, which is a really fantastic movie. I watched it recently. Highly recommend you check that one out if you haven't seen it. And then there was a series, a 4-part series called Constantine that appeared on the History Channel that was really fantastic as well. So a lot of good resources out there if you want to learn more about Constantine and his impact. Talk about some of the quotes of Constantine. First one is, "Thinking is the great enemy of perfection. The habit of profound reflection, I am compelled to say, is the most pernicious of all habits formed by civilized man." So he was not he was more of a doer. He was an action person. He wasn't about sitting around thinking too much and about philosophizing. He wanted his troops and his men to do. "No man should be denied leave of attaching himself to the rites of Christians or to whatever other religion his mind directed him, that thus the supreme divinity to whose worship was freely devoted ourselves might continue to vouchsafe his favor and benevolence to us." So you can see he really was a man of faith, and he believed very strongly in having an open society where all faiths could be celebrated and worshipped. And Christianity, of course, was his preference and the state religion, but he also was tolerant towards other religions practicing. "With free minds, all are to worship their gods." So same concept. Constantine really wanted there to be an open society and let anyone believe what they want to believe. This great king was the first Roman ruler to champion the cause of Christ. He spared no efforts, dedicating his life to the promotion of the principles of the gospel. His blessed name shines out across the dawn of history like a morning star. What a great quote that is about Constantine and his impact. He saw with his own eyes the trophy of the cross of light in the heavens, above the sun, and bearing the inscription, "Conquer by this." At this sight, he himself was struck with amazement, and his whole army also. So that's talking about that Milvian Bridge battle and that vision that he saw of the cross. And from that day on, he had his soldiers put that cross symbol on their shields for the rest of their battles together. So 29px, in this sign thou shalt conquer. And that's talking about that same symbol, the Cairo symbol that he went with his troops the rest of their time. Hence, I am fully persuaded that everything is in the best and safest posture, since God is vouchsafing. So he really felt almost invincible, he and his men, after that, now that they had adopted God as their savior and as their guide. They really felt very empowered. For he who is Lord of all cannot endure that these blessings, which in his own loving kindness and consideration of the wants of men he has revealed for the rise of all, should be perverted to serve the lusts of any. His only demand from man is purity of mind and an undelified spirit, and by this standard he weighs the actions of virtue and godliness. You see, he really wanted an orderly and organized society, Christian society, one that had Christian values and really respected the faith and respected how things should be done. So that should give you a really good sense for Constantine the Great, his life, his impact, the fact that he was able to reunite the Roman Empire that had been splitting apart for some time, and his adoption of Christianity as the state religion, of his beliefs in Christianity as they continued their journey throughout his life. And then you can see the impacts he made across the entire empire with all the building that he did. Constantinople and all the things he did in the different regions to reunify and re-strengthen the empire overall. And then, of course, the Council of Nicaea was a really important aspect of history that he called together, and there were a lot of deliverables that came out of that particular meeting that really set up Christianity as the dominant religion even today. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple short videos, and we'll come back and talk about them on the other side.
Constantine is known as the emperor who made Christianity the main religion of Rome, thus making a substantial contribution to its spreading throughout the known world at the time. He is also revered for his efforts in building Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, which became the most powerful city in the world. Made a saint for his acceptance and propagation of Christianity, his behavior was often far from saintly. Brutal and ruthless, Constantine owed his power to the sword, murdering his allies, friends, and even his closest family in his quest to retain his authority. A man of contrasts, his embrace of Christianity was nonetheless a decisive act, perhaps unparalleled in its importance to Western history. Constantine was born in a Roman Empire that was in crisis. Civil wars, diseases, and invasions were rendering the empire overstretched and vulnerable. When he was born in 280 AD, Emperor Diocletian had split the empire into 4 quarters, ruled in a tetrarchy of 4 different rulers, hoping that this would help bring order. Constantine's father, Constantius I, was one of these rulers. In 305, Constantius was proclaimed emperor of the western half of the empire, while Diocletian took the eastern half for himself. As a child, Constantine was sent to Nicomedia, modern-day Izmit, Turkey, grew up in the eastern half of the empire, and was raised at the court of Diocletian. During this time, Constantine witnessed Diocletian's ruthless and fierce persecution of Christians, which may have molded his later approach. Amid the complicated tussle for power, Constantine was proclaimed emperor after his father's death in 306 in York, Britain. A capable and flamboyant soldier, Constantine set about consolidating his power base in Gaul before setting his sights on broader glory. His first obstacle was a rival for the title of Western Emperor, his brother-in-law Maxentius, whom he defeated at the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312. Not only was this a tremendous political victory for Constantine, but it also proved to be revelationary for another significant reason. Before the battle, Constantine is said to have had a vision or dream wherein Jesus promised he would protect his armies through the vision of the cross accompanied by the words, "By this sign you will conquer." Following the vision, Constantine ordered that a cross, the Christian symbol, be painted on all of his soldiers' shields. There are various versions of this legend, with slightly different variations depending on sources. Regardless of his conversion circumstances, under this Christian emblem, Constantine emerged victoriously, attributing the victory to the Christian faith. It should also be noted that in the classical Greek and Roman tradition, many rulers expected political and military success to derive from religious piety. This weakens any claim that Constantine's conversion was nothing more than a politically motivated calculation. In 313, Constantine, now a Western emperor, met with his Eastern counterpart Licinius. Together, they agreed to the Edict of Milan, a groundbreaking proclamation for freedom of worship to all people. This proclamation effectively legalized Christianity as a religion, allowing Christians to organize their worship as they saw fit. The edict also returned all property confiscated during the recent persecutions, a sign of things to come. Although the empire's western and eastern halves enjoyed a time of limited peace, factionalism was never far away in the Roman Empire. Relations between Constantine and Licinius deteriorated. In 320, Licinius resumed his persecution of Christians, effectively culminating in a renewed civil war by 324, in which Constantine triumphed to emerge as sole Roman emperor. He reunited the empire under the banner of Christianity. Constantine attributed all of his success to Christianity, writing that he had been chosen as God's instrument for the suppression of impiety, and dubbing himself the equal of the apostles. The triumphal arch built at Rome attributed his victories to the inspiration of the divinity. However, Constantine also ensured that plenty of credit went to his own military genius. In a letter to the Persian king, he asserted that God had chosen him to bring peace and prosperity to all lands, and that it was his ambition to do so. Seeing it his duty to propagate the true religion, he had no qualms about using his imperial position to further Christianity's cause. Many have questioned Constantine's commitment to the faith, though there is even more evidence in letters to Christian clergy that suggest Constantine was sincere. Indeed, Eusebius, Constantine's biographer and most prominent source, insisted that the emperor believed he had a special relationship with the Christian God. In any case, Constantine did his bit to remove the empire's impiety and unify the state through Christianity. Crucifixion, sexual immorality, prostitution, pagan sacrifice, and gladiatorial shows were all abolished. He also glorified Christianity through his building works. The Church of the Holy Apostles was built in Byzantium, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was erected in Jerusalem. In Rome, the Church of St. Peter was handsomely decorated to reflect its importance. In his reign, Constantine also established influence over the Holy Church itself, weighing in on debates over the true nature of the religion. Wanting a unanimous position on the divine nature of Christ, Constantine summoned a group of church officials to the Council of Nicaea in 325. From the meeting came the Nicene Creed, which established that Jesus was in fact a divine being. Constantine hoped and urged church officials to accept the council's conclusions, though violent struggles over the questions raised continued to cause tension within the empire. Although Constantine seems to have been a popular ruler, he didn't have everything his way. During a visit to Rome to celebrate the 20th anniversary of his victory and the beginning of his reign, Constantine refused to participate in a pagan procession. This offended the Romans and was indicative of the broader religious spectrum still evident within the empire. Around the same time, Constantine had his wife, Fausta, and his son, Crispus, executed for treason, possibly even for adultery. The circumstances surrounding the executions are shrouded in mystery, though it was evidence that Constantine could be as ruthless as he was practical in dealing with threats. After the souring events in Rome, Constantine was never to return. He set about dedicating his new capital, Constantinople, at Byzantium, now modern-day Istanbul, as the Second Rome, rebuilding it to glorify the empire. As with many cases for Constantine, the decision to move the capital was practical and emotional. From a military perspective, Constantine realized it would be easier to defend against attacks from the east and protect valuable lands in Egypt if he moved his capital to a more defensible eastern position. Constantine rebuilt on a monumental scale. He offered free bread and full citizenship as an enticing welcoming offer to encourage high-ranking men to move there with their families. Churches popped up all over the city, as Christians were naturally welcomed. Yet it should be noted that religious tolerance was not extended to all. Persecution of the Jews, the Christ killers, as Constantine saw them, intensified during his reign. Nevertheless, the city tripled in size over this rebuilding period. Constantine also built huge legislative halls and an enormous palace to establish the necessary gravitas for the new capital. This was a concerted attempt to shift the center of power away from the empire's emotional heart, Rome. Ultimately, Constantinople did eclipse Rome. Rome fell as the Western Empire crumbled in the late 5th century, and the Byzantine Empire, centered around Constantinople, continued to thrive. Constantine died in 337 AD. His legacy is inextricably linked to his reform of the Roman Empire's religious picture, and indeed the history of Christianity following his conversion. Unfortunately, this makes it difficult to assess his rule more widely, whether or not he was an able politician, a great military commander, or a kind and honorable ruler. Because of his reform's polarizing nature, contemporary sources must be taken with a pinch of salt. Before and after his reign, Christian scholars venerated him as a protector, a wise guiding hand. Many contemporary sources represent little more than state propaganda. Some historical writings are even thought to be in the emperor's own hand. Conversely, Constantine critics were often his political enemies who wished to continue following the pagan religion. They were quick to judge his conversion to Christianity harshly, claiming it led to the empire's downfall in the long run. Whatever the truth, there seems to be a distinction in Constantine's legacy. It is not merely the conversion and protection of Christianity that is important, but the Christianization of the Roman culture alongside the upper class's classical culture. This essentially paved the way for the growth of Western medieval culture in the following centuries.
As we learned in a previous video, the main reason for the gathering of bishops and other church leaders in Nicaea in the year 325 was to discuss a theological controversy that arose among the church in Alexandria about the deity of Jesus Christ. There had been theological and practical controversies in various churches before, but this Nicene Council was unique for at least 4 reasons. First, the Nicene Council was called for and led by a Christian emperor in a new era of peace, in which Christianity was legal and persecuting Christians was illegal. The early historical accounts of Constantine by Eusebius of Caesarea and Socrates of Constantinople indicate that the emperor became a Christian in the year 312. This was 13 years before he called the Nicene Council to convene in the year 325. Constantine also wrote letters to Christians, in which he identified himself as a fellow laborer and Christian before and after the council. As a Christian emperor, Constantine believed that the Christian church could heal from her schisms if her leaders convened to have sincere conversations about their disagreements. In May of 325, Constantine sent invitations to bishops around the Christian world, requesting their presence in Nicaea. The town of Nicaea was located where the city of Iznik, Turkey, is today. There was a church building and an imperial palace there. Nicaea was a 2 to 3 day walk southeast from Constantinople, which Constantine was building as his new eastern capital of the Roman Empire. Second, the The Nicene Council was unique in that it was attended by so many different representatives of the Christian Church. No official record exists of exactly which bishops and other church officials attended which sessions on which days of the council. However, it is generally believed that at least 300 church leaders attended the council. The number present is given variously as 300 by Socrates, 318 by Athanasius and others, and 270 by Theodoret of Cyrus. Eusebius noted that many different nationalities were present in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, when the church began as described in Acts chapter 2. However, this assembly in Nicaea should be considered greater, because these were the leaders of many churches from many more places. Eusebius reported that council attendees came from at least 22 specific locations in Europe, Africa, and Asia. Interestingly, the Bishop of Rome at that time, Sylvester I, was unable to attend because of his old age. He sent 2 Roman priests in his place, named Vitus and Vincentius. Constantine provided government-funded transportation for all bishops to Nicaea, and provided food and housing for the attendees during the 2 months of sessions, which lasted from June until August. Regarding the controversy between the Arians and the Alexandrians about the deity of Jesus Christ, council attendees entered their first June meeting without a prior general consensus. Historian Everett Ferguson identified 5 different viewpoints represented in the first session. Number 1. Convinced adherents of Arius' teaching, led by Eusebius of Nicaea. Number 2. Moderate subordinationists in the tradition of Origen, who would not have stated their position as sharply as Arius, but saw no doctrinal danger in his position. A subordinationist is someone who sees a hierarchy among the 3 persons of the Trinity, that is, Father over Son and Son over Spirit. Number 3. Conservatives hostile toward new formulas, who nonetheless wanted unity but were not very well educated. Number 4. Those who found Arius' teachings dangerous and wanted them outlawed. And number 5, monarchians, whose views were perceived as modalistic. Modalism is the belief that God is one person, who exists in 3 chronological modes, first as Father, next as Son, and then later as Spirit. Hosius, Bishop of Cordova, Spain, who functioned as Constantine's ecclesiastical advisor, presided over the council sessions at the request of the emperor. However, Constantine himself presided over the final session of the council in August. Eusebius's description of that final session described Constantine as patiently allowing parties who represented all views to make their case in full, without being pressured into hurrying or being misunderstood. As the council reached its end, the sentiment was no longer divided into several views, but focused on one conclusion. Certain claims of the Arians were wrong. A third reason the Nicene Council was unique is that it published a positive statement of what the churches all believed about the deity of Christ, but it also specified anathemas of what all the churches considered to be heresy. The word anathema is a proclamation by the church that those who do not agree with the council's decision were not to be considered members of the church. The positive statement of the council is now known as the Nicene Creed from the year 325. It reads as follows: We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of all things visible and invisible. And we believe in one Lord, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the only begotten of the Father, who is of the substance of the Father, God of God, light of light, true God of the true God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father, by whom all things were made, both which are in heaven and on earth, who, for the sake of us men and on account of our salvation, descended, became incarnate, and was made man, suffered, arose again the 3rd day, and ascended into the heavens, and will come again to judge the living and the dead. We also believe in the Holy Spirit. In addition to this positive statement, the council added the following anathema: But the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church anathematizes those who say, there was a time when he was not, and he was not before he was begotten, and he was made from that which did not exist. And those who assert that he is of other substance or essence than the Father, or that he was created or is susceptible of change. In order to protect the uniqueness of God, Arius and his followers had claimed, there was a time when the Son did not exist, but only the Father existed alone. The Son was created out of nothing. The Son is of a different substance or essence than the Father, and the Son is susceptible to change. Although Arius's writings and the writings of Arians were largely destroyed, a small fragment of Arius's writings called the Thalia exists today. Most of what we know about Arius's actual teachings comes from the writings of Athanasius and others who wrote against Arianism in the 4th century. Arius himself was not allowed to attend the council because he was not a bishop or official church leader, following his excommunication by the Synod of Alexandria in the year 317 or 318. Eusebius of Nicomedia and Theognis of Nicaea represented the Arian party at the council. When Eusebius of Nicomedia read a clear and blatant denial of the deity of the Son of God, sentiments of the council overwhelmingly turned against the Arians. The key word in the Nicene Creed is homoousios, which literally means same essence or same substance. The council affirmed that the Father and Son are of the same essence. They are each equally the one true God. The details of how exactly to express and explain the Father's and Son's sameness and difference would be the subject of future writings and councils. The conclusion of this council was aimed at identifying specific Arian ideas that were heretical and establishing language that would end the disunity in the churches over the topic. A fourth reason the Nicene Council was unique is that they depended so heavily on a technical term not found in the scriptures, which was the term homoousios. While both sides had referred to scriptural words in making their cases, the term homoousios functioned as a definitive term for the council to defeat the heresy of Arianism. The term homoousios itself has an interesting story. It came up earlier in a local synod in Antioch in the winter of the year 268 and 269. Paul of Samosata was the bishop of Antioch at that time, but espoused a view of Jesus that described him as fully human, but gaining divinity because he was a good person. Paul was said to use the term homoousios in a way that defended his heretical view of Christ, so the synod rejected the term as it was used by Paul. Later, at the Council of Nicaea, however, the term homoousios was officially adopted by the Church to explain the Orthodox view of what the Father and Son share in common, the same essence or substance. Beyond the issue of Jesus' deity, there was one other issue causing division between some of the churches in Asia Minor, who celebrated Easter on the 14th day of the Jewish month of Nisan, and the rest of the churches who celebrated Easter on the following Sunday. In about the year 155, Polycarp of Smyrna and Anicetus of Rome had agreed to disagree on the exact date on which Easter should be celebrated in different regions. However, insofar as the different celebration days became a cause of disunity, the council also addressed this issue and decided that Easter should always be celebrated on a Sunday. This is what the majority of churches were already doing. At the conclusion of the Nicene Council, Constantine proclaimed that the cruel power of Satan was removed by divine aid through the agency of our work. Constantine especially told the Christians in Alexandria, "Let us embrace that doctrine which the Almighty has presented to us, and that which has found a common judgment between 300 bishops cannot be anything other than the doctrine of God, because the Holy Spirit, living in the minds of so many dignified people, has, in effect, enlightened them regarding the divine will." In other words, in the mind of Constantine, there was no more reason for further division among the churches, due to differences of theological opinions or ecclesiastical practices. When the council had formally concluded, Constantine had a great feast to celebrate the church's unity, and the bishops were sent home with letters from the council and from the emperor himself, proclaiming what the conclusions of the council were and what the future beliefs and practices of all the churches should be.
So as you can see, so many interesting things that are in that video. The first one is the consequential nature of Constantine's life. Some of it is still shrouded in mystery, but much of it was written down by reporters and people that were around him, people at the time who were documenting what he was doing in his empire reign, documenting all of his movements, his battle victories, the churches he was building and where, and obviously the building of Constantinople and the moving of the main capital from Rome to Constantinople, although Rome was still being maintained for some time. So all those things are really fascinating. And as you see the evolution that he was going through in his life, from a very young man, taking over from his father, unifying the entire empire under his power, and then eventually making Christianity the state religion. And then also, as you see, then finally getting to the Council of Nicaea, a very important event in Christianity. Other than Jesus Christ and his birth and his life and his resurrection, there's probably no more important person or period in the Christian faith in terms of solidifying it as a major world religion than Constantine the Great and the Council of Nicaea. These are the two moments when all the disparate fractions of the Christian church were brought together to agree to what it really meant to be a Christian. What did they really believe all together? And they came up with the Nicene Creed, and they came up with the 20 canons, and they left there with a unified church, or as unified as it could be. And so you can see what an incredible life he led, what an amazing impact on the Roman Empire at the time, and then on our society even today. We have so many different aspects of Constantine's life that we're still living under, in terms of living under a Christian society and living under those values. So hopefully you enjoyed that. You learned a lot about Constantine the Great tonight, about the Council of Nicaea, about his impact, this emperor that 300 years after Jesus Christ was crucified by the Romans, then made the Roman Empire a Christian empire. It really was an incredible and consequential event in human history. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. We love having your comments, and we love having you come join us and go with us on this journey. Drop us a comment on another topic you'd like us to pick up next time. And again, hopefully you love history as much as we do. And we'll see you next time on an episode of Traveling Through History. Have a good night.
Traveling through history, the show that uncovers the past mysteries. Washington, Jefferson, Alexander the Great, William the Conqueror, or the independence of the state.